The morning she was sent to fetch water, the sky did not warn anyone. It was clear, pale blue, stretched wide above the village like it always did. Birds moved freely from tree to tree, and smoke rose gently from cooking fires. Nothing in the air suggested that this ordinary task would become the moment everything changed. Her name was Adesewa, and she was 17. She had made that walk to the river more times than she could remember. Every girl in the village had. The path was familiar, dusty at first, then narrow, curling between tall grass and thick shrubs, until the land dipped and the sound of running water became impossible to ignore. The river had a name, but no one said it aloud unless they had to. It was one of those things spoken in whispers like old curses or the names of the dead. People said the river was alive. They said it chose who returned. 3 women had disappeared there in the past 10 years. A boy drowned during the rainy season. Another girl was found days later downstream, her calabash still floating beside her, untouched. The elders blamed carelessness. The mothers blamed stubborn spirits. Everyone blamed the river, but still, water had to be fetched. That morning, Adesewa's mother hesitated before handing her the clay pot. "Go with the others," she said, her voice low. "There are no others," Adesewa replied. "They've all gone already." Her mother studied her face for a moment too long, then nodded. "Be quick. Don't linger. And don't answer if you hear your name." Adesewa smiled like she always did when adults spoke in riddles meant to scare children. She balanced the pot on her head and stepped into the path without looking back. The farther she walked, the quieter everything became. Insects faded. Birds went silent. Even the wind seemed to slow as she approached the riverbank. She noticed it but dismissed the unease, telling herself it was only because of the stories she had grown up hearing. The river appeared suddenly, wide and dark, its surface smooth in some places and violently restless in others. The water moved with a force that felt deliberate, as though it knew where it was going and why. Trees leaned over it, their roots exposed like fingers clawing at the soil. Adesewa lowered the pot and knelt. That was when she heard it, a splash behind her. She froze. Slowly, she turned. No one was there. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She scanned the trees, the bushes, the path she had come from. Nothing moved. The river flowed as it always had, indifferent, relentless. She exhaled and reached for the pot. "Adesewa." The voice was soft, familiar. Her hand stopped midair. Her mother's voice. Every warning she had ever received rushed back at once. "Don't answer. Don't turn. Don't follow. Don't believe." But the voice sounded so real, so close. "Adesewa, come here." She squeezed her eyes shut. "No," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. The water beside her rippled violently, and something brushed against her ankle beneath the surface. She jerked back, falling hard onto the ground. Her pot rolled, stopping inches from the river's edge. Her breath came in sharp gasps. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement in the water. Not a fish, not debris, but something long and dark slipping just below the surface. The river's calm was gone. It churned softly now, as if excited. She scrambled to her feet, abandoning the pot, and ran. The path that had taken her less than 20 minutes to walk now felt endless. Branches clawed at her skin. Her chest burned. She could hear something behind her. Not footsteps, not splashing, but a dragging sound, like wet fabric pulled over stone. She did not look back. She burst into the village, screaming. People rushed toward her, grabbing her arms, shouting questions over one another. She collapsed into the dust, shaking so badly her teeth rattled. "Where's the water?" someone asked. She could not speak. When she finally found her voice, all she could say was, "It followed me." The elders were summoned immediately. By sunset, the village was divided. Some said she had angered the river by running. Others said the river had chosen her, and she had escaped only by luck. A few whispered something worse, that the river never lets go once it touches you. That night, Adesewa did not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the water, not the sound of a river flowing, but something closer to breathing. Just before dawn, she sat up suddenly, her heart racing. Her feet were wet. She screamed, and in that moment, far away beyond the trees, the river swelled. What happened next would force the village to confront a truth they had buried for generations. and Adesewa would learn that surviving the river was only the beginning. The scream brought her mother running. A lamp was lit, then another, and soon the small room was filled with frightened faces. They stared at Adesewa's feet, glistening in the dim light. The mat beneath her darkened as though water had been poured onto it. But there was no water in the room. The clay pot by the wall was dry. The floor was dry. Only her feet were wet, cold enough to sting. An elder was sent for before the sun rose. By morning, word had spread through the village that the river had followed a girl home. The elders arrived in silence, their walking sticks tapping softly against the ground. They examined her feet, her eyes, the tremor in her hands. They asked her to speak, to recount everything from the moment she stepped onto the path to the moment she woke screaming in the night. Adesewa obeyed, her voice steady at first, then breaking as she described the voice calling her name, the movement beneath the water, the sound that chased her through the forest. No one interrupted her. When she finished, the oldest elder closed his eyes. "It has marked her," he said. The words settled heavily in the room. Her mother wept openly. Her father stared at the wall, as though refusing to hear. "What does that mean?" someone asked. The elder did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked for palm wine and poured a small libation onto the earth outside the house. Only then did he speak. "The river is not just water," he said. "It is a passage, a keeper. It takes what is owed." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "What does it want from her?" another voice asked. The elder looked back at Adesewa. "It already knows her name." From that day, the village watched her. Children stopped playing when she passed. Women whispered and crossed themselves. Even those who had known her since birth seemed uncertain now, as if she had become something unfamiliar overnight. Adesewa felt it most at night. Every evening, just before sleep claimed her, she heard it. The soft, persistent sound of water where there should be none. Sometimes it came from the corner of the room, sometimes from beneath her bed. Once, she heard it from inside her own chest, like a second heartbeat. Her dreams changed. She dreamed of standing at the riverbank, unable to move, while the water rose around her ankles, her knees, her waist. She dreamed of hands reaching up from beneath the surface, not to pull her down, but to guide her forward. She dreamed of voices speaking a language she somehow understood without knowing how. On the seventh night, she woke to find a trail of wet footprints leading from her mat to the door. She did not scream this time. She followed them outside. The moon was full, bright enough to turn shadows sharp and long. The village slept. Not a single dog barked. The footprints led toward the path. Her feet moved before her mind could stop them. She walked. Each step felt inevitable, as though she were remembering something she had always known rather than doing something new. The forest greeted her without resistance. Branches parted. The air felt warm, almost welcoming. When the river came into view, it was different. It glowed faintly, its surface shimmering like polished metal under the moonlight. The violent currents were gone. It flowed smoothly now, patiently. She stood at the edge, her heart pounding, and waited. The water parted. From the center of the river, something rose, not fully solid, not fully liquid. It took the shape of a woman, tall and slender, her hair flowing like dark weeds around her shoulders. Her eyes were deep and endless, reflecting stars that did not exist in the sky. "You ran," the figure said, her voice echoing from every direction at once. "I was afraid," Adesewa replied, surprised to find that she could speak. "Fear does not excuse death. What do you want from me?" The river spirit studied her for a long moment. "Balance." Before Adesewa could ask what that meant, the figure dissolved back into the water. The river returned to its restless state, as though nothing had happened. Adesewa collapsed to her knees. At dawn, she was found there by the women who came to fetch water. Alive, unharmed, silent. When she was brought back, the elders knew. "The river has claimed her service," one of them said. "She will stand between us and it." "What kind of service?" her father demanded. The elder's voice was heavy. "She will speak for it. Listen to it, and when it is hungry, she will tell us." The first demand came 3 days later. The river flooded its banks without warning, swallowing crops and washing away livestock. No one drowned, but the message was clear. The elders gathered, desperate, and turned to Adesewa. She stood by the river, trembling, and listened. "It wants a sacrifice," she said quietly. The word spread like fire. Panic followed. A goat was brought. The river swelled, but did not calm. A ram followed. Then chickens. Each offering disappeared beneath the surface, and each time, the water grew more violent. "It is not enough," Adesewa whispered. They all knew what that meant, even before she said it. The river did not want animals. It wanted what it had always taken, a human life. The village erupted. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Some demanded that Adesewa be given to the river, claiming she was already marked. Others swore they would die before allowing it. Adesewa listened to them argue over her fate as though they were discussing someone else. That night, she made her decision. She returned to the river alone. "I will not give you another," she said into the darkness. "If balance is what you want, take me and be done." The water surged forward, wrapping around her ankles, her legs, her waist. Cold, heavy, alive. "You misunderstand," the voice replied. "You are not the payment." The water stopped just below her chest. "You are the gate." In that moment, Adesewa understood. The river had never been a curse. It was a doorway, and it was opening. Adesewa returned to the village before sunrise, soaked to the skin but breathing. No one asked how she had escaped the river again. They could see it in her eyes. Something had shifted, settled, taken root. From that day, the river no longer acted without warning. Before the water rose, Adesewa felt it in her bones. A tightening in her chest, a pull behind her eyes. She would wake from sleep gasping, whispering words that made no sense until she reached the riverbank and spoke them aloud. When she did, the water responded. Sometimes it calmed. Sometimes it surged just enough to remind the village of its power. People stopped calling the river evil. They started calling Adesewa dangerous. Parents warned their children not to stare at her too long. Men avoided meeting her gaze. Women who once greeted her warmly now watched her from doorways, measuring distance, fear outweighing familiarity. She had become a boundary between safety and disaster, between the living and whatever waited beneath the water. And boundaries are rarely loved. The elders instructed her carefully. She was never to enter the river fully, never to speak its words inside the village, never to eat food offered after sunset. She obeyed, because each rule felt less like tradition and more like survival. Still, the river kept testing her. One evening, a young boy went missing. His footprints ended near the water. The village erupted in panic, and all eyes turned to Adesewa. She felt the pull immediately, sharp, insistent. She walked to the river as the sun dipped low. "Give him back," she said. The water rippled, mocking. "He crossed," the voice replied. "Crossing has a cost." Adesewa stepped closer, ignoring the elders' shouts behind her. "He is a child." "So were the others," the river answered. Rage flared in her chest. For the first time since the night she was marked, Adesewa spoke without fear. "Then take from me instead." The water surged violently, rising to her knees, her waist, her ribs. Pain exploded through her body as memories not her own flooded her mind. Faces of those lost, their last breaths, their terror. She screamed, not from drowning, but from knowing. The water receded. The boy was thrown onto the bank, coughing alive. The village rejoiced. Songs were sung. Fires were lit. Food was prepared in her honor. But the river was silent. That silence frightened her more than its anger. That night, Adesewa dreamed of a world beneath the river. Not darkness, but depth. Not death, but waiting. She saw paths leading away from the village, far beyond the forest, far beyond the land she knew. She saw gates opening and closing, guided by hands that looked very much like her own. She woke knowing the truth the elders had hidden. The river did not exist to take lives. It existed to keep something else from crossing over. And she was weakening. Each time she bargained, each time she defied it, the boundary thinned. The water rose more often. The dreams grew stronger. Her reflection in the river began to change, her eyes darker, her shadow slower to follow her movements. The elders noticed. "She cannot continue," one said. "She is becoming more river than girl." Her parents begged her to stop going, to let the elders handle offerings, prayers, anything that did not involve her standing at the edge of that living water. But Adesewa knew better. If she stopped, the river would choose someone else. Or worse, it would stop choosing at all. The final warning came without sound. One morning, the river was gone. In its place was a vast, empty trench, the earth split open, damp and steaming. Fish lay scattered and dying. The smell of decay hung heavy in the air. Panic seized the village. Adesewa stood at the edge, shaking. The river had not disappeared. It had crossed. That night, the forest screamed. Something moved between the trees, dragging wet earth behind it. Crops withered overnight. Animals refused to drink from wells. Children woke screaming of hands reaching through the ground. The elders gathered, pale and desperate. "It wants full passage," Adesewa said quietly, "and it will take it through me." Her mother fell to her knees. Her father could not speak. "There is another way," an elder whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. Adesewa shook her head. "No gate lasts forever." Before dawn, she walked to the trench alone. She did not look back. When she reached the center, she stepped into the earth and spoke the river's true name for the first time. The ground trembled. Water burst upward in a violent roar, swallowing her whole. The forest fell silent. By morning, the river had returned to its bed. It has never taken another life since. Sometimes at night, villagers swear they see a figure standing at the riverbank, watching, waiting, holding the line between worlds. They say the water glows softly then, calm and obedient. They do not fetch water alone anymore. And if this story held you until the end, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because some stories are meant to be remembered, and some warnings are not meant to be ignored. Years passed, but the village never returned to what it was before. They rebuilt homes, replanted crops, and learned new paths that avoided the river whenever possible. Children born after that season grew up hearing the story as a warning rather than history. To them, Adesewa was not a girl who once laughed and fetched water like everyone else. She was a name spoken carefully, a presence felt when the air grew heavy near the riverbank. The elders changed their laws. No one was allowed near the river after sunset. No songs were sung by its edge. No mirrors were washed in its water. And when a child dreamed of running water, their parents listened closely. The river behaved. Its current softened. Flood stopped. Fish returned in abundance, but never too close to shore. It gave water freely, but only when approached with respect. It was as though something had been locked back into place, sealed with a living key. Yet signs remained. Sometimes, a girl would pause mid-conversation and turn toward the forest, her eyes unfocused, listening to something no one else could hear. Sometimes, a man would wake with wet footprints beside his bed, leading nowhere. Sometimes, the river would glow faintly under the moon, and the sound of water would carry a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. On those nights, the village stayed indoors. One season, during a long drought, desperation pushed the elders to the edge of their own rules. Wells dried up, crops shriveled, children cried from thirst. After days of debate, they agreed to approach the river and ask, truly ask, for help. They went together, slowly, humbly. At the bank, the water was low but clear. The eldest among them spoke, his voice trembling with age and memory. "We remember," he said. "We have not forgotten the price that was paid." The river stirred. A figure appeared, just for a moment. Not fully formed, not fully gone. A silhouette shaped like a young woman, standing where water met earth. Her face could not be seen, but her presence pressed against them like wind before a storm. Then she was gone. That night, rain fell. Not a flood, not a storm, just enough. From then on, the elders understood something they had refused to accept before. The river was not appeased by fear or sacrifice. It responded to memory, to acknowledgement. But memory fades. A generation later, new voices questioned the old rules. Young men laughed at warnings. Young women challenged stories they had never witnessed. Progress came, as it always does, carrying arrogance with it. One evening, a group of youths went to the river to prove there was nothing to fear. They drank, they shouted, they dared one another to step into the water. The river remained still, until one of them spoke a name. Adesewa. The water surged violently, knocking them backward. Trees groaned. The ground shook. The youths ran screaming. Their courage dissolved in seconds. No one was harmed, but the message was unmistakable. That night, an old woman who had been a child when Adesewa vanished sat upright in her sleep. She smelled river water. She heard a familiar voice whisper, tired but firm, "Remind them." By morning, the story spread again, told with care, with detail, with the weight it deserved. Not as a legend meant to entertain, but as a truth meant to protect. And still, some things remained unanswered. Was Adesewa alive in the way the living understand? Or had she become something else entirely? Neither human nor spirit, but function? A boundary with a heartbeat? No one knew. What they did know was this: the river never called another name, never dragged another body beneath its surface, never followed another girl home. The gate held. Sometimes, travelers passing through the forest claimed to see a young woman walking along the riverbank at dawn, her feet never quite touching the ground, her reflection slower than her movements. When greeted, she never replied. When followed, she vanished into mist. The villagers did not chase her. They bowed their heads instead, because some people are not meant to return. Some are meant to remain, standing quietly between disaster and peace, unseen but essential. Long before Adesewa was born, before the river earned its reputation, before fear replaced understanding, the village had known what the water truly was. It had been written in stories older than the elders themselves, stories spoken once a year and then slowly shortened, softened, until only fragments remained. In those days, the river was called a watcher, a border, a listening thing placed where the world thinned. The land a village stood on was not ordinary ground. It rested on a crossing, not a place where spirits wandered freely, but a fault where what should never meet pressed close enough to feel each other breathe. The river flowed there by design, not by chance. It was meant to weigh what approached, to filter intention from hunger, curiosity from corruption. And it was never meant to stand alone. There was always supposed to be a keeper. In the beginning, the village honored that role. A woman was chosen, not by force, not by fear, but by consent. She lived long, not because the river spared her, but because it sustained her. She listened. She warned. She closed the gate when it stirred. But generations passed, and gratitude turned into routine. Routine into neglect. Neglect into denial. When the last keeper died, no one replaced her. The river waited. It did not grow angry at first. It whispered. It nudged. It took small things, animals, careless feet, those who crossed without listening. But the village called it cursed instead of calling it what it was. So the river did what it had always done when balance was ignored. It chose. Adesewa had been marked long before the day she walked to fetch water. The signs were there from childhood. The way she heard storms before clouds formed. The way she woke seconds before disasters. The way she dreamed of places she had never seen. The river did not make her what she became. It recognized her. That was the truth she learned in the final moments beneath the water. As the river closed around her, it did not drown her. It opened her. Memory poured in, not just of those lost, but of what lay beyond the gate. Not demons in the way fear imagined them, but forces without shape, without mercy, without time. Things that did not hate humanity, but did not value it either. If the gate fell, the village would not be destroyed in a single night. It would unravel, slowly, quietly, completely. Adesewa became the seal. Not trapped, not imprisoned, bound by purpose. She exists where the river touches what cannot be named. She holds the weight, so others never have to feel it. The river obeys because it must. The gate remains closed because she stands there. And one day, when the land shifts again, when memory fades too far, when stories are reduced to entertainment instead of warning, the river will choose again. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. So when you hear stories like this, don't rush past them. Don't dismiss them as myth. Every legend is a memory trying to survive forgetting. If this story held you until the very end, like this video, so it can reach others, subscribe for more deep, unforgettable stories like this one. And leave a comment. Do you think Adesewa was chosen by fate or by the village's failure to remember? Because some stories end when they are told, and some only begin when they are believed.